During a heated argument, my father bellowed, "You've been nothing but a financial drain since day one." My mother just crossed her arms in silence. I didn't argue. Instead, I stopped the automatic transfers covering their medical bills. A week later, their insurance lapsed, and the panic calls started. I, 32M, never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd cut off their parents financially. But then again, I never thought my father would tell me I'd been nothing but a drain on him since the day I was born. The argument started over something stupid. I'd come over to drop off some groceries because Mom mentioned she was feeling too tired to go shopping that week. Dad was in the living room, surrounded by his usual mess of newspapers and remote controls, watching some cable news program at maximum volume. I set the bags down in the kitchen and mentioned that I'd noticed their medical insurance payment had increased again. I'd been handling it for 3 years now, ever since Dad's heart surgery, and I thought maybe we should look into switching providers to save some money. That's when he exploded. He told me I had no right to question how they spent their money, that I was always sticking my nose where it didn't belong, that I'd been doing this my whole life. The volume escalated quickly. Before I knew it, he was standing up, face red, veins bulging in his neck, screaming about how ungrateful I was. Then came the line that changed everything. He said I'd been nothing but a financial drain since day one, that raising me had cost him everything, that I owed them more than I could ever repay. I looked at Mom. She was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, arms crossed, face expressionless. I waited for her to say something. Anything. To tell him he was being ridiculous, that he didn't mean it, that I'd actually been helping them for years. But she just stood there in silence, looking at the floor. I didn't argue. I didn't yell back. I just picked up my keys and left. The drive home was a blur. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I'd been covering their medical insurance for 3 years, their mortgage for 2, their car payment for 18 months. After Dad's surgery, he'd been forced into early retirement, and their savings had evaporated faster than they'd expected. I'd stepped in because that's what you do for family. I made decent money in tech consulting, and I was single with no kids. It made sense. But apparently, I was the drain. I was the problem. I'd been the problem since birth. When I got home, I opened my laptop and stared at my banking dashboard. The automatic transfers were all there, scheduled like clockwork. Insurance on the 1st of the month, mortgage on the 5th, car payment on the 10th, utilities scattered throughout. I'd set them up to be automatic because I didn't want them to have to ask. I didn't want them to feel like a burden. I canceled every single one. The insurance payment was due in 4 days. I didn't cancel it out of spite or anger in that moment. I canceled it because I was done being called a drain while simultaneously keeping their lives afloat. If I was such a burden, they could handle their own finances. They were adults. They'd managed before I started helping. They could manage again. I slept terribly that night, but I didn't reverse the cancellations. For days passed, then 5, then 6. My phone stayed silent. No apology from Dad. No call from Mom. Nothing. Part of me wondered if they'd even noticed. Maybe they had enough in their account to cover everything. Maybe I'd been worrying for nothing. On day 7, my phone started ringing. It was Mom. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Her voice was tight with panic. She asked if I'd forgotten to pay the insurance. The pharmacy had just rejected Dad's prescription refill. They'd called the insurance company, and apparently, the policy had lapsed. There must have been some mistake. Could I check on it? I told her there was no mistake. I'd stopped the automatic transfers. There was a long silence. Then she asked why I would do something like that. Her voice had shifted from panic to accusation, like I'd committed some unforgivable betrayal. I reminded her of what Dad had said. I reminded her that she'd stood there and said nothing. I asked her point blank if she agreed with him, if she really thought I'd been nothing but a financial drain. She didn't answer the question directly. Instead, she told me I was being childish. Dad had been stressed. He hadn't meant it. I couldn't just abandon them like this over some words said in anger. They needed that insurance. Dad's medications alone cost over $1,000 a month without coverage. I told her I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was simply no longer volunteering to be their ATM while being treated like a burden. If they needed help, they could ask for it respectfully. They could acknowledge what I'd been doing. They could apologize. She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, Dad called. This time I let it go to voicemail. His message was predictably furious. He called me selfish, immature, vindictive. He said I was trying to kill him by taking away his insurance. He said he'd always known I'd turn on them eventually, that this was who I really was underneath all the pretending. I deleted the voicemail and blocked his number. Mom called again that evening, then the next morning. Then my uncle called, then my aunt. The family phone tree had clearly been activated. I was the villain in whatever story my parents were telling. My uncle left a message saying he was disappointed in me, that family was supposed to stick together, that whatever had happened couldn't be worth risking their health over. My aunt sent a long text about forgiveness and being the bigger person. I didn't respond to any of them. What none of them knew was the full picture. They didn't know that I'd been paying for everything for years. They didn't know that my parents had never once said thank you. They didn't know that every time I visited, Dad found something to criticize. My job wasn't stable enough. I should have been married by now. I should have given them grandchildren. I dressed too casually. I didn't visit enough. I visited too much and got in the way. They didn't know that Mom had started making comments too over the past year. Little digs about how I must be doing well financially, how nice it must be to have such freedom, how some children really took care of their parents while others just did the bare minimum. Apparently, paying all their major bills counted as bare minimum. I told myself they were just stressed, that the health problems and money problems were making them lash out, that underneath, they appreciated what I was doing. But standing in that living room, watching Mom's silent complicity while Dad called me a drain, something had broken. 2 weeks went by. The calls decreased in frequency, but increased in desperation. Mom left a message saying Dad had missed 2 doses of his blood pressure medication because they couldn't afford the refill. She said if something happened to him, it would be on my conscience. She said I was proving him right about who I really was. I almost caved. Almost. But then I remembered sitting at Dad's bedside after his surgery, promising him I'd take care of everything, and him squeezing my hand and saying he knew he could count on me. I remembered thinking that this was it, that we'd finally have the relationship I'd always wanted, that almost dying would make him appreciate life and family more. Instead, it had made him bitter. He'd resented needing help, and somehow that resentment had morphed into blaming me for being the one who provided it. Update 1. 3 weeks in, my cousin reached out. She was the only family member I still trusted, mainly because she'd also been on the receiving end of my parents' criticism over the years. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, expecting another intervention. But instead, she told me she'd talked to my uncle and gotten the real numbers. My parents had been telling everyone that I'd occasionally helped with a bill here and there, but had suddenly and cruelly cut them off completely. They'd made it sound like I was being vindictive over a small argument. My cousin asked for the truth, so I showed her. I pulled up my banking records on my phone and walked her through 3 years of payments. The insurance premiums that had increased from $1,200 to $2,000 a month. The mortgage payments. The car payment. The utilities. The emergency dental work I'd covered. The new appliances when theirs broke. The property taxes. She stared at the numbers in silence. Then she asked why I'd never told anyone. I explained that I hadn't wanted to embarrass my parents. I thought it was a private family matter. I genuinely believed they were grateful, even if they didn't say it often. My cousin asked what I wanted to happen now. That was the question I'd been avoiding. What did I want? An apology seemed both necessary and insufficient. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted them to understand that you can't call someone a drain while they're keeping you from drowning. But more than that, I wanted them to prove they could stand on their own. Dad was only 62. Mom was 60. They weren't ancient. Dad's health problems were manageable with medication. They'd made choices over the years that had led to their financial situation, and I'd been enabling them to avoid the consequences. Maybe the kindest thing I could do was step back. My cousin offered to mediate a conversation. I told her I'd think about it. That night, Mom showed up at my apartment. I don't know how she got past the building security, but there she was, knocking on my door at 9 p.m. I opened it and found her standing there looking smaller than I remembered. She asked if she could come in. I stepped aside. We sat in my living room in awkward silence for a moment. Then she started talking. She said Dad was proud. Too proud. That he'd been embarrassed about needing my help and hadn't known how to process those feelings. That the surgery had scared him and made him feel weak and mortal. That taking it out on me was wrong, but that I needed to understand where he was coming from. I asked if she was here to apologize or make excuses. She flinched at that, but didn't answer. I told her I understood Dad's pride. I understood feeling weak. What I didn't understand was turning around and attacking the person who'd been holding everything together. I asked her again why she'd said nothing during that argument. Why she'd let him say those things without once standing up for me. She got defensive. She said marriage was complicated. She couldn't just contradict Dad in front of me. It would undermine him. They had to present a united front. I asked if that united front included agreeing that I was a financial drain. She said that wasn't fair. I pressed harder. Did she agree with what he said? Yes or no? She stood up to leave. She said she'd come here to try to fix things, but clearly, I just wanted to fight. I told her I wanted the truth. She said the truth was that families helped each other without keeping score, and I was being petty. I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder. I'd printed out 3 years of bank statements and highlighted every payment I'd made on their behalf. I handed it to her and told her to take it home, to sit down with Dad and actually look at the numbers, to see exactly how much of a drain I'd been. Then I told her they had 2 options. Option 1. Dad apologizes sincerely, they acknowledge what I've done, and we work out a sustainable plan going forward where they take responsibility for their own bills, and I help with true emergencies only. Option 2. They continue as they are, managing on their own, and we maintain minimal contact. She took the folder and left without another word. Update 2. A week of silence followed. Then I got an email from Dad. Not a call. An email. It was short and formal. He acknowledged that he'd spoken in anger and that his words were hurtful. He said they'd been reviewing their finances and had made some arrangements. They'd be managing on their own going forward. He thanked me for the help I'd provided over the years. He hoped we could move past this incident and maintain a cordial relationship. It was the most emotionless apology I'd ever received. No real accountability. No acknowledgement of the pattern of disrespect. Just a sterile few sentences that read like a business memo. I didn't respond immediately. I sat with it for a few days. Part of me wanted to reject it, to demand a real conversation. But another part of me realized something important. This might be the best I was going to get. My father was fundamentally incapable of admitting he was wrong, and my mother was fundamentally incapable of standing up to him. I could keep fighting for the relationship I wanted, or I could accept the relationship that was actually possible. I wrote back. I said I appreciated the email and agreed that maintaining distance while they got their finances in order made sense. I said I hoped Dad's health remained stable and that I wished them well. 2 months have passed now. We've exchanged a few brief texts. I sent a card for Dad's birthday. They sent me a generic thank you. It's civil and cold and nothing like what I'd imagined family would be. My cousin told me they've been struggling, but managing. They'd apparently been living beyond their means for years, even before Dad's surgery, using credit cards to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Having to actually face their bills has forced them to make real changes. They've sold the car and bought something cheaper. They're eating at home instead of going out constantly. Mama's picked up some part-time work. Part of me feels guilty. Part of me wonders if I was too harsh. But mostly, I feel something I haven't felt in years around my parents. Peace. I'm not constantly anxious about whether the payments went through. I'm not bracing for criticism every time I visit. I'm not twisting myself into knots trying to be good enough to earn basic respect. I've also started seeing a therapist. She's helped me understand that what I experienced was financial abuse combined with emotional manipulation. My parents had trained me to believe that providing for them was my obligation, but receiving gratitude or basic respect was too much to expect. That dynamic was never going to lead anywhere healthy. I don't know if we'll ever repair the relationship fully. Maybe as they age and need more help, we'll have to revisit these conversations. Maybe Dad will have another health crisis and I'll be faced with the same choices. But now I know my boundaries. I know that helping someone doesn't mean accepting abuse. I know that family obligations run both ways. The strangest part is that I don't actually feel vindictive or triumphant. I just feel tired and a little sad. I'd spent so many years trying to be the good son, the helpful one, the one who stepped up. And in the end, it wasn't enough. Maybe it was never going to be enough. Maybe the problem was never really about money at all. A few weeks ago, my aunt reached out again. This time her tone was different. She'd apparently had a long conversation with my cousin and learned the full story. She apologized for judging me without knowing the facts. She said she understood why I'd done what I did. She also mentioned that Dad had been complaining to the family about how ungrateful children are these days, how he'd sacrificed everything, how he'd raised me to be successful, and this was how I repaid him. I asked her what she said in response. She told me she'd finally spoken up. She'd told him that maybe if he'd shown some appreciation, things would have turned out differently. She said he'd gotten angry and stopped talking to her too. I felt bad that I'd cost her that relationship, but she brushed it off. She said she'd been biting her tongue around Dad's behavior for years, and maybe it was time more people stopped enabling him. I've thought a lot about enablement lately, about how I'd enabled their financial irresponsibility by always catching them, about how the family had enabled Dad's temper by always making excuses, about how Mom had enabled both by never taking a stand. Breaking that cycle meant someone had to be willing to be the villain. I guess that someone was me. I'm not sure how this story ends. Maybe one day Dad will have a real moment of clarity. Maybe Mom will find her voice. Maybe we'll find our way back to something resembling a healthy relationship. Or maybe this cool distance is the best we can do, and I'll have to make peace with that. What I do know is that I'm not a drain. I never was. And I don't need my parents to acknowledge that for it to be true. Their inability to appreciate what I did says everything about them and nothing about my worth. I'm learning to be okay with that.